The Nintendo Switch still seems like a new console. People still treat the system like it just came out, and that it has loads of life still ahead of it. And maybe it does, but the Switch isn't exactly new anymore. The Switch has been out for 2.5 years, which for a typical Nintendo system would be halfway through its life. I think most Nintendo fans still view the Switch as the cool new system from Nintendo that's just getting started, but can we really say that anymore? Is the Switch really still a cool new system? Does the Switch really have that much more left in it? Hello all 1,875 of you, I'm Redkwan, and is the Switch old now? So first of all, why does this matter? Well, whether it's still cool honestly doesn't really matter, it's just kind of annoying. But what does matter is whether the Switch really has a lot of life ahead of it. How much longer is the Switch really going to last? When will Nintendo start slowing down the game releases for the thing? I think these questions are pretty important, or at least more important than anything else I ever talk about. So how much life does the Switch really have left? Well, let's start with that the Switch is supposedly planned to be supported 7 to 10 years. Now what exactly does that mean? Well, it could mean that the system to replace the Switch isn't coming out until 7 to 10 years after the Switch came out, or it might mean that the next system could come out earlier, but the Switch would still see some support after that. Like how the 3DS still got some games after the Switch released. So if we're going off that, it seems like the Switch definitely could have a lot of life ahead of it. But just because Nintendo was planning on that doesn't mean that's actually how it's going to happen. And there are a couple of factors that could change this. There's the possibility of sales slowing down and excitement for the system dropping off. There's the fact that Nintendo sticks to a pretty consistent 5-year console life cycle, but possibly the biggest reason the Switch might not last 7 to 10 years is that we're slowly closing in on the inevitable releases of the PlayStation 5 and Xbox 2, Xbox 720, Xbox 1,875 of you, I'm Redkwan. I don't know, they're bad with numbers. Now I know that people argue that PlayStation and Xbox don't directly compete with Nintendo, but a lot of people do only buy one console, and they're probably going to be choosing between one of those three. And even if they aren't so much direct competitors, Nintendo will at least want their systems to get all the big games the other systems are getting. And again, I know Nintendo systems aren't exactly known for their third-party support, but it's better for both Nintendo and their fans if big third-party games get released on their systems, especially because there's a pretty good reason to buy the Switch version, because it can be played portably. So even if they aren't the focus of a Nintendo console, Nintendo will still want their systems to get as many third-party games as they can. And let's be honest, right now the Switch isn't exactly getting many of the big third-party games releasing on the other systems, and once the next generation comes out, the Switch is going to fall ever further behind, and lose most of, if not all, big third-party support. Yes, Nintendo could make a more powerful Switch, but if the games run really poorly on the base Switch and Switch Lite, I don't think that's really going to change much. And if third parties leave completely, it might be really hard to get them back. Is this a problem? Well, maybe most Nintendo fans don't care too much about third-party games. Maybe. But I'm pretty sure everyone at some point has had the experience where they have a Nintendo system and they really wish a game that isn't on that Nintendo system would come to it. Most people have some game on the other consoles that they would like to see on the Switch, even if they mostly care about the Nintendo games. And if the Switch falls behind what basically amounts to a generation and a half in terms of power, it seems pretty unlikely that any big third-party games are going to come to it. And if third-party games completely abandon Nintendo, I honestly don't know if they'll ever come back. The more Nintendo systems become disassociated with big third-party releases, the less incentive there's going to be for companies to put their games on these Nintendo systems. And even if Nintendo comes back with a console that's just as powerful and super easy to develop for, which just to be real, seems pretty unlikely, I think the damage may have already been done. We've seen what the Wii U did for third parties, and even though the Switch seems like a great place for third parties to show up, it's still missing out on plenty of big titles. I know a lot of Nintendo fans don't care too much about these types of games, but if the Switch falls too far behind, it'll be very hard to get those big games back. And I don't think that's something Nintendo wants to happen. So how does all of this factor in? Well, if the PlayStation 5 and Xbox -15-degree wind chill are releasing in 2020, which seems like what it's gonna be, the Switch is going to be going into its 4th year way behind the PlayStation and Xbox. I think if the Switch is going 3 years into the lifetimes of the PlayStation 5 and Xbox Tuesday, they risk losing third-party support for the future, and risk being seen as having outdated hardware and just being a kid's console more than they already are. Again, they might be able to do alright despite this, but it would probably hurt their brand going forward. I have a hard time seeing Nintendo go into 2024 before releasing their next system. What seems most likely to me is that the Switch is going to be replaced by their next big system in 2022 or 2023. They could do something similar to what they did with the Switch and release it in the spring of 2024, and who knows, maybe I'm being really dumb and overreacting about the importance of maintaining competitive hardware and AAA developer relations. The Switch 2 could come out in 2040 for all I know, because I don't know much. We still have Metroid Prime 4 and Breath of the Wild 2 on the way after all, and I think right now those seem like they're coming to the Switch, and both seem fairly early on in development. They of course might get pushed back from releasing on the Switch, but if they aren't, 2022 might be a little early, and 2003 or 2024 might be a more likely final year pick. But if I had to guess, I'd still say the holiday seasons of 2022 and 2023 seem like they'd be the most likely. It still gives the Switch about 6 years of being the only console, and Nintendo could still hit the 7 to 10 years of support mark if they keep putting out a few games after the next system releases. You know, like they did with the 3DS, pretend to keep supporting the Switch as a pillar of their brand before quietly tossing it under the rug in a year. Like you do. The Switch gets a little bit longer of a lifespan than a typical Nintendo console because of its success, but doesn't fall too far behind the other consoles to where it could potentially damage their brand or future third-party games. I think this is a good middle ground. But let's get back to the main question of the video, because that was basically one big side tangent. Is the Switch getting old? Yeah, it kind of is. If the Switch is going to last 5, 6, or even if it lasts 7 years, it's almost halfway through its life. And typically the last year of a Nintendo console's life is full of a few smaller filler games that help you spend your time waiting for the next system. If Metroid and Zelda really are going to be hitting the Switch, which they seem to be right now, we could still have some big games coming in the final years, but besides those two and the obvious ones we know are coming like Animal Crossing and Luigi's Mansion, the big Switch games might be coming to an end sooner than we think. I think we're probably getting another 3D Mario, and there are still some fairly big series that haven't gotten Switch entries yet, but honestly, I think the Switch might start slowing down within the next couple of years. I think most Nintendo fans still see the Switch as a new system, with a lot of games left in it, and maybe they're totally right, but the Switch has been out for a while at this point, and based on the normal lifespan of a Nintendo console, it might already be starting to slow down. I can't think of a joke to end this with, so just pretend I said something funny. No, your writing's getting lazy. Well, I'm Redkwan. Do you think the Switch is still a pretty hip new system, or do you agree that it's not really anymore? How long do you think it'll last? What arbitrary number do you think the next Xbox should go by? I can't think of any more questions, so just pretend I asked a good one. Wow, great question, me. Anyways, I'm Redkwan, thank you all for watching, and I'll hopefully see you all later. Goodbye.
Hey, look, we're going over there. Making new videos, so you better behave. Oh, hey, that's right, you see. Going through and through in a Zamboni.